I'm not hindering you. If you both want to make fools of yourselves, I suggest you do what you said you'd do. Go and find a policeman.
For 6 years, the Doctor and his adventures had delighted audiences young and old alike. Families had eagerly tuned in weekly to join the renegade Time Lord and his companions as they fought against the evil purposes of a whole host of monsters, both terrestrial and not of this world. But the adventures had always been inescapably monochrome. However, on the 3rd of January 1970, the times were a-changing. A new decade had begun, and viewers would, for the first time, be able to join their intergalactic hero in colour. The introduction of colour was not the only major change to the programme for the launch of its 7th season. In fact, only a maximum of 200,000 of the 8.4 million viewers who tuned in for the Third Doctor's debut would have been able to enjoy his first adventure in full colour. Over the next 5 years, viewers would gradually buy into the new technology and higher licence fee required to receive their favourite programming in the full colour spectrum.
Grundig, probably the best name on a colour television.
Most of those who watched BBC One that wintry evening in January, therefore, would not have immediately noticed any great departure from the last time they had watched the show, when the Second Doctor had been sent spinning through the void to begin his exile on distant Earth, the judgment and sentence being handed down by his own people, the Time Lords. It wasn't long before the more radical changes became noticeable, however, and it became clear that a very new and very different era had begun. The seeds of this transformation had been sown in the previous 2 seasons, however. After attempting to make more effective use of the show's budget by commissioning stories comprised of a great number of episodes, the production team came to the conclusion that the creation of vast amounts of alien costumes and sets was no longer practical. The format of Doctor Who needed to change, and former script editor turned producer Derek Sherwin took inspiration from another popular science fiction, Quatermass. The creation of legendary thriller writer Nigel Neal, Bernard Quatermass was arguably Britain's first television hero, appearing in 3 significant BBC serials in the 1950s.
Professor Quatermass, isn't your concern unduly personal? I think we all realise how much is owed to your formative influence.
I brought the rocket group into being.
But it is, after all, a government project. It always has been.
It was intended for peaceful scientific research, not to be perverted to fulfill such a monstrous conception as this dead man's deterrent.
In these memorable and influential serials, the stories revolved around the steadfast scientist Quatermass, head of the British experimental rocket group, who, with his intellect and morality, had to defeat menacing threats from alien invaders intent on destroying mankind. Sound familiar?
5 million years.
Sherwin decided that this format was just what the new Doctor needed to continue to thrive and compete as the new decade began, and British audiences were beginning to enjoy and expect the polished high production values of American imports such as Star Trek. The Web of Fear, the final story of the 5th season, had indicated that this new direction was not only workable, but could potentially be hugely successful. With a purely earthbound setting, clever design work and effectively atmospheric lighting, this story, which saw our heroes face off against the evil genius of the Great Intelligence and its army of robotic Yeti in the spooky tunnels of London's underground, had proved a real hit with audiences and impressed the powers that be at the BBC. As a result, Sherwin looked to this story for guidance when rebooting the show for the Third Doctor's era. A significant element of this story was the inclusion of the army and supporting scientist characters to both help and hinder the Doctor in his quest to defeat the alien menace. This new extension to the TARDIS family is best personified in the character of Colonel Alastair Gordon Lethbridge-Stewart, the stoic and incredulous army officer in charge of the Allied forces, played by the late, great Nicholas Courtney.
Ah, Doctor, what's this I hear about Travers?
Well, the Yeti broke in while we were out looking for Chorley.
Chorley?
The following year saw him return at the head of another band of brothers to face the threat of an invasion of Cybermen. This time, however, the soldiers were no longer generic infantry, but a specialist team of men set up to face such extraterrestrial threats. This was the debut of UNIT.
Yes, well, since the Yeti do, I've been in charge of an independent intelligence group that we call UNIT. That's United Nations Intelligence Task Force.
You mean you're like a world secret police?
Not quite. We don't actually arrest people. We just investigate.
This new military force gave the production team many opportunities to stage exciting action sequences, with specialist stunt team Havoc donning the army fatigues in several stories and breaking world records with death-defying feats. With the template set, the Third Doctor's era began in a radically different fashion to that of the Second's. The TARDIS arrives in contemporary Britain, and the Doctor, his face obscured, falls from the interior of his now non-functional time and space travel machine, literally coming down to Earth with a thud. After this, much time is spent establishing the new team, with now Brigadier Lethbridge-Stewart recruiting a new scientific advisor for UNIT, the ridiculously overqualified Liz Shaw, who after 6 years of mostly naive youths was a radical change to the companion paradigm.
Then what do you do, exactly?
We deal with the odd, the unexplained, and living on Earth, or even beyond.
Alien invaders? Little blue men with 3 heads?
Indeed, the 7th season of Doctor Who would see this traditional dynamic adjusted somewhat, so that those around the Doctor would be more like colleagues than companions.
Splendid. That sounds like the Doctor.
After the Doctor's admittance to hospital, the Brigadier visits him, expecting to find the crumpled form of the cosmic hobo with whom he is familiar, and the audience finally gets to build a first impression of this new incarnation from the perspective of the only constant from the previous era. Much like the Brigadier, they must have wondered who exactly this strange man would prove to be.
Lethbridge-Stewart. My dear fella, how nice to see you again.
He knows you, sir.
But he can't do. Look here. Can you hear me? Who are you?
Don't you recognize me?
I'm positive we've never met before.
Oh, dear. Oh, I can't have changed that much, surely.
By the time of his casting as the Third Doctor, Jon Pertwee was already a household name. He asked his agent to apply for the role of the Doctor on his behalf and discovered that he was already on the production team's shortlist. He had made a name for himself as a comedy performer, his rubbery features and ability to affect innumerable silly voices finding him lots of work across several mediums in the years leading up to his Time Lord debut. Indeed, by happy coincidence, he even appeared beside William Hartnell in the 1953 comedy Will Any Gentleman?
Mr. Henry Sterling. I hope I'm not interrupting you?
No, we were expecting you.
Were you?
Yes. Were we? Oh, I don't know.
I didn't give the maid my name because I don't like frightening people.
No, of course not. Who are you?
I'm Detective Inspector Martin.
Pertwee was born in 1919, and like his predecessors, discovered his talents for performance by taking part in many school productions. As a young man, he attended the prestigious Royal Academy of the Dramatic Arts, but this came to an ignominious end when he was expelled for refusing to play a Greek wind, and allegedly scrawling graffiti about his tutors in the toilets. Such a rebellious and anti-authoritarian streak would become a key component of his eventual characterization of the Doctor. By 1970, he was best known for his long-running role in the popular radio comedy The Navy Lark, which had been successfully running for 11 years and which was very heavily influenced by his own experiences in the Royal Navy during the war, where he had very narrowly avoided being one of the almost 1,500 crewmen who went down with the HMS Hood after it was sunk by the German battleship Bismarck in 1941. Pertwee had been transferred for officer training shortly before.
Look, any more unseemly mirth and you'll cop a draft to a hotter place. Sorry, pardon.
I don't like it, I don't. I don't like it. No, not at all, I don't. It's not red. No, I don't like it, not at all. No, I don't, no.
Don't you like it?
No.
Considering his radio personality and his vaudeville inclinations, the audience who settled down to welcome him into the role of the Doctor can be forgiven for expecting the new incarnation of their hero to be somewhat whimsical, and indeed there are shades of whimsy in his initial scenes.
Inflexible, you know. Could be useful on the planet Delphon, where they communicate with their eyebrows.
But the new Doctor's personality slowly and surely settles down into a far more self-assured and in-control character than that of his immediate predecessor.
That's Delphon, for how do you do? Delighted, Miss Shaw, delighted.
What are you a doctor of, by the way?
Practically everything, my dear.
Jon Pertwee, used to playing exaggerated characters and stereotypes, asked the producer how to approach playing the role, and the advice was to play him as Jon Pertwee. Understandably, the actor was taken aback at first, but this soon changed to enthusiastic delight at the opportunity to play an idealised version of himself, and it's not long into his debut story before he becomes the extravagant and heroic action hero a generation would come to think of as their Doctor. In stark contrast to his more diminutive predecessors, the Third Doctor was an imposing figure who diverged from the tramp-like sartorial scruffiness of his second incarnation by promptly dressing himself in flamboyantly elegant clothes. Tattered trousers and baggy coats were out, frilly shirts, capes, and ostentatious neckties were the new norm. Complementing this extravagant attire was the new Doctor's fondness for exhilarating vehicles, exemplified by his gregarious yellow roadster, Bessie. The Third Doctor's era saw several stories indulge Pertwee's love of motoring, providing the audience with many death-defying action sequences involving vehicles one simply can't imagine Hartnell or even Troughton getting behind the controls of. Sometimes this indulgence went a little too far. In his final story, the producer gifted the outgoing star with a chase sequence involving cars, gyroplanes, speedboats and hovercraft, which lasts for no fewer than 12 whole minutes, by which point any edge-of-your-seat tension is somewhat dissipated. And the less said about the bloody Whomobile, the better. Seriously, if you're interested in this monstrosity, you're going to have to Google it.
Doctor, we're flying!
Yes, of course we're flying.
Building on the popularity of James Bond, this era sees the protagonist become quite definitively an action hero for the first time.
I'm quite spry for my age, actually.
He's still the genius we've come to know and love, but shows himself as equally adept with using swords and his fists to thwart his enemies as he is with his mind.
Venusian Aikido, gentlemen. I do hope I haven't hurt you.
Despite the revelations in his debut of his truly alien physiology, the first time this is conclusively established.
If that is his heart, nurse, what is this?
I don't know, sir.
This Doctor is arguably more human than before. He fits into his Quatermass-like role as chief scientific advisor to UNIT surprisingly quickly, at home in the number of laboratories provided for him, and hardly ever venturing inside the TARDIS for several seasons. Indeed, audiences would not get another glimpse of the interior of the magnificent time machine until the third story of Pertwee's second year. There is an inherent contradiction to his character. Many stories see the Third Doctor butting heads with bureaucratic pen-pushers and figures of authority, where Pertwee's own rebellious and anti-establishment nature informs his performance.
If I could leave, I would. If only to get away from people like you.
Doctor?
And your petty obsessions. England for the English, good heavens, man. I have a duty to my country, not to the world.
Simultaneously, however, this Doctor is, by far, the most establishment incarnation, even going so far as reprimanding his companion Joe for not respecting the military hierarchy.
Joe, the Brigadier is doing his best to cope with an almost impossible situation. And since he is your superior officer, you might at least show him a little respect.
This paradox of his personality does sometimes indicate a rather hypocritical nature, and his condescension towards Joe in particular does make him hard to love at times. The Third Doctor's first season is the one most strikingly different from what went before, with his later seasons returning somewhat to the fantasy of the earlier programme. The extensive use of location filming gives the stories a grittiness and, appropriately, an earthiness that established the series as a programme aimed at a wider audience than just children. The incoming production team, comprising producer Barry Letts and script editor Terence Dix, both of whom would have an enormous impact on the programme and its evolution, bring an energy and experimentalism which shook up the programme without ignoring its past, and it would be fair to say that this period saw the greatest reboot of the series, if not ever, then at least until the debut of the Russell T Davies era in 2005. There was a drawback to this new format, which quickly presented itself, however. By stranding the Doctor on Earth in one particular time period, the versatility which had ensured a constant stream of various stories was significantly curtailed. In some respects, the decision to exile the Doctor was a sensible one, financially speaking, but Terence Dix knew that Doctor Who was not Quatermass, and if the show was to continue to enjoy longevity, it would require this narrative restriction to be lifted as soon as possible. For the time being, however, the production team was stuck with what Malcolm Holt called only two types of story, these being alien invasion or mad scientist. What they made of these two options led to some of the best of 70s Doctor Who. A particularly great example of these early years is the 7-part Inferno, the finale to Pertwee's first year as the Doctor. Inspired by the real-life Project Mohole, the 1960s scientific effort to drill through the Earth's crust, alongside the very topical notion of the search for new energy sources, Inferno concerns an experimental drilling project intending to release the hypothesized Stahlmann's gas, named for the stubbornly proud leader of the project, Professor Stahlmann.
This is Mr. Sutton. So I gather. Another recruit to your cause, no doubt.
What cause?
Well, his crusade to bring this whole operation to a grinding halt, Mr. Sutton.
As part of his continuing efforts to repair the TARDIS, the Doctor has used his unit status to gain access to the nuclear reactor on site in order to power the TARDIS console, which he has removed from the rest of the ship for experimentation. The tension begins to build as Sir Keith Gold, the project director, becomes concerned over Stahlmann's obstinacy and disregard of proper safety precautions in his obsessive goal of tapping the gas as soon as possible.
You had no right to accelerate the program without proper consultation with the Ministry.
I have every right, Sir Keith.
Very well, I'm sorry, but I shall have to refer the matter to the Minister.
Please do. I can tell you exactly what he'll say. That this project is vital to our industrial future. The country needs the new power source, and Stahlmann is the only one who can give it to us.
Meanwhile, a strange green substance has begun to leak from the drill head, and contact with this liquid leads to werewolf-like transformation into vicious and brutal creatures called Primords. The real USP of this story comes at the end of episode 2, when a sudden cut of power to the Doctor's console during an experiment sees him, the console and Bessie transported to a remarkably similar yet significantly different Earth.
Unity is strength.
This parallel world has its own Project Inferno, led by an equally arrogant and obsessive Stahlmann, with our familiar unit characters also providing security. But it is soon apparent that the Doctor has ended up in an England ruled by a fascist totalitarian dictatorship, where slave labour and firing squads are all part of the alternative project's daily schedule.
Liz? Liz, it's me. Don't you recognize me?
The exact history of this parallel world is never really expanded upon, but we do hear that the royal family were executed during the Second World War, so we can assume that the implication is that in this reality, the British Union of Fascists led by Oswald Mosley was successful, and post-war Britain has become a very different place as a result. One of the undoubted joys for the actors and the audience is in seeing the familiar faces of beloved characters as evil and darker versions.
This is ridiculous.
This is particularly true in the case of the Brigadier, or Brigade Leader, his duelling scar and eye patch immediately establishing him as a villainous and unhinged version of our brave and stalwart form.
Keep quiet! You will find it unwise to be insolent.
Nicholas Courtney memorably puts in a superb performance as Lethbridge Stewart's deranged doppelganger, a bully who gradually cracks under the mounting tension, revealing himself as a selfish coward whose hysterical threats are eventually ended by Section Leader Shaw.
Let him go, Brigade Leader.
We helped him. We've every right to go. I'll give you until 3, Doctor. 1.
You'll have to shoot me, Brigade Leader. I have no intention of taking you.
2, 3...
Now's your chance, Doctor!
A combination of the parallel world setting and Don Houghton being the first writer to script the Third Doctor after he was cast means that for the first time in his tenure, Pertwee gets to play scenes where his actions are distinctly different from that of his predecessors. The action man antics start here, and therefore it's a good story to introduce yourself to the character of this incarnation. It becomes clear to the Doctor that the drilling will end in inevitable calamity, and as the parallel project is more advanced than that of our own world, the countdown to oblivion is closer to its terrible conclusion.
You must stop this countdown before it's too late. Do you hear me? You must stop it. Gate leader, shoot that man now. You can't do that. It's just murder. If you break through the Earth's crust now, you'll release forces you never dreamed could exist.
To final phase.
Listen to that.
0
That's the sound of
minus
this
20
panic
seconds.
screaming out its rage.
Despite his valiant efforts, the Doctor cannot overcome the paranoia and suspicion with which the others regard him, and he is rendered powerless to stop the fiery Armageddon, which engulfs the parallel Earth, following Penetration 0. The only hope left is for him to return to our own universe and prevent us from suffering a similar fate.
Go on, Doctor, go now!
I can't, it's still too erratic.
Thanks to an inventive script by Houghton and the steady direction of Douglas Camfield, who had helmed many of the show's most classic stories, including the aforementioned Web of Fear, Inferno has a cinematically accomplished look and feel, with the tension building inexorably from episode 1 all the way to the final instalment. This is enhanced by the unrelenting sound of the drill, building in intensity until characters literally have to shout to be heard. It's a clever device which creates an unpleasant atmosphere, alongside the story's score, which adds a compelling quality to the scenes. This is Doctor Who at its most Quatermass, the gritty and down-to-earth remit of this new era most explicit. The only real nod to the prior era is the inclusion of the Primords. Most people criticise this element, an addition which was not in the original script, indicating the desire for a recognisable monster which would blight otherwise excellent stories in subsequent years. I'm looking at you, Kaysa Banjazani. However, I don't mind the Primords. I feel that they reflect one of the key themes of the story, such as the good-evil flips of the coin the parallel Earths explore. Their design is a little unconvincing, but their concept recalls Victorian-era concerns over atavism, best exemplified in Robert Louis Stevenson's The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, where the cultured and sophisticated personification of a gentleman consumes a potion which regresses him to a barbaric and animalistic personality. At first glance, the inclusion of this concept seems a little at odds to the science fiction thriller premise of Inferno, but one of its major themes is the hubris of mankind leading to presumptions of taming nature, and of the ancient and primordial world raging against the arrogance of the tiny humans. Set against this context, I can appreciate the Primord monsters, even with their cute little noses. The ecological concerns of Inferno reveal one of the major subtextual threads which run throughout the Third Doctor's time. Many stories see our hero dealing with the fallout of man's tampering with the forces of creation, either on Earth or elsewhere, culminating in the eco-parable of the Green Death, where the robotic and the artificial have perverted nature in the search for profit and control.
Good grief.
This is due in major part to the influence of Barry Letts, the producer for pretty much the entire era, who brought a signature tone and vision which was far more consistent than that of the previous producers since Verity Lambert. A committed Buddhist, his liberal influence resulted in stories which dealt not just with ecological concerns, but also those of colonialism and, most topically, apartheid.
Segregation.
His liberal agenda never came at any cost to the show's core narrative or motifs, however. Rather, this was a natural evolution, considering the established ethical standpoint of the main character.
I can't understand your concern, Doctor. This planet as it stands is no longer of any use unless we make the atmosphere breathable.
Even if it means wiping out every Solonian in the process?
Earth is fighting for its survival. The side effects are of no importance.
Genocide is a side effect. You ought to write a paper on that, Professor.
Even though he oversaw most of Pertwee's first season, Letz's influence becomes most pronounced in his second, where the format which would become so familiar for the series for the next few years is clearly established. Terror of the Autons, the first story of Doctor Who's 8th season, sees the Doctor firmly ensconced in the unit lab, tinkering and experimenting to his heart's content, with the Brigadier, his 2IC Captain Yates, and loyal Sergeant Benton all comprising what is known as the unit family, alongside ham-fisted bun vendor Joe Grant as the new plucky companion.
I'm your new assistant.
Oh, no.
Before all this, however, comes probably the most important addition to the new format, stepping from his mysterious time-space vehicle at the top of the story.
Who the heck are you? Well?
I am usually referred to as the Master.
Oh, is that so?
Universally.
Letts, along with script editor and Who legend Terrance Dicks, conceived of an arch-villain in the same vein as the criminal mastermind Moriarty of the Sherlock Holmes series. He was to be the Doctor's equal, but opposite, once a close friend, but now twisted, knowing no level too low to stoop to in his pursuit of power and conquest. He was masterfully played by the incomparable Roger Delgado, who established the character as a lethal yet sophisticated and refined individual, a perfect foil for the flamboyant Third Doctor.
Well, he used to be a friend of mine once. A very good friend. In fact, you might almost say we were at school together.
A master of disguise, an accomplished hypnotist.
Obey me and no one else. Do you understand?
The Master soon became the spider found at the centre of many webs of deceit and manipulation. In fact, even Letts and Dicks admitted later he was at the centre of rather too many webs, as he became involved in no fewer than 8 adventures of the following 3 years, each time defeated by his worthy adversary. Being so integral to the Third Doctor's era, he was planned to feature in his final story, his character coming full circle when he was to renounce his evil and sacrifice himself to save the Doctor's life. However, following Delgado's tragic death in a car accident, these plans were shelved. Ironically, this meant that the Master would live on, making a return to the show several years later, allowing other writers up to the present day to explore this fascinating opponent.
I must see the Doctor die. Shame and dishonour.
A character so unlike all other adversaries, a reminder of what the Doctor could be if he were to similarly sacrifice his values and beliefs.
Hello, Missy. I'm the Master. And I'm very worried about my future. Give us a kiss.
The Pertwee years saw the programme's first significant anniversary, and it would be remiss of me not to mention the story chosen to commemorate the first 10-year milestone, the 3 Doctors. Despite contributing some important elements to the mythos, such as the important figure of Omega, the long-lost scientist who made the Doctor's people the Lords of Time, it's a bit of an underwhelming story, with some rather ridiculous monsters in the form of the Gel Guards.
Holy Moses! What's that? Get Sergeant Benton!
However, the teaming up of the Doctor's 3 incarnations must have been incredibly exciting back in 1973.
I can see you've been doing the TARDIS up a bit. I don't like it.
Even now, after several arguably better multi-Doctor stories, it's still a delight to see Troughton and Pertwee argue and bicker, as I imagine any of us would do if we were to get the chance of meeting our younger selves.
He's not one of them, is he?
Well, not so much one of them as one of us. One of me, to be precise.
Oh, no. I'm sorry, my dear. I hate to be contrary, but I can see he's a little bit confused, poor old chap, and I do feel you should have the correct explanation. You don't mind, do you?
Yes.
I didn't think you would. You see, Joe, I may call you Joe meantime. You see, he is one of me.
Oh, I see. You're both Time Lords.
Well, quite. Well, not quite.
Oh.
Not just Time Lords. We're the same Time Lord.
Unfortunately, William Hartnell's illness had by this time advanced considerably, and his appearances are restricted to pre-filmed inserts on the scanner. In what would be his final performance, Hartnell still manages to get across his acerbic incarnation, despite being noticeably frail.
Oh, so you're my replacements. A dandy and a clown.
It's fitting that the man who started it all ended his career with one last performance of his most important part. The story is also notable for finally ending the Doctor's exile on Earth. the Time Lords gifting him back his knowledge and a new dematerialization circuit as a reward for his services in saving the universe from the deranged Omega. After tentative journeys in time and space in previous seasons testing the waters, after several years of purely earthbound adventures, the TARDIS was back to normal, with the extended stop in the present day establishing a base from which the Doctor could now journey back into the wider universe.
Look, they've sent me a new dematerialization circuit. And my knowledge of time travel law and all the dematerialization codes, they've all come back. They've forgiven me. They've given me back my freedom.
A personal favourite of this latter part of the era must be the Time Warrior. This story is noteworthy for several reasons. Coming at the end of Pertwee's time, it begins to establish many elements which would feed into his successor's era. It introduces fan favourite Sarah Jane Smith, the independent and bold investigative journalist who would become such a stalwart companion and go on to have a life beyond the programme itself.
I'm a journalist, Sarah Jane Smith.
You realise this is a very dangerous place to be in.
It also finally gives us the name of the Doctor's home planet, Gallifrey, but most significantly for me, it sees the programme stepping back into historical territory for the first time since the Troughton era, being one of the earliest examples of what has become known as the pseudo-historical. Unlike the true historicals of Hartnell's time, these stories take place in recognisable settings in the past, but include science fiction elements such as alien machinations for the Doctor to fight against, with established history at stake.
Star. A fallen star. Careful, Captain. Recite the devil's word to me.
The writer of The Time Warrior, Robert Holmes, had already enjoyed a long career with Doctor Who, and would go on to become even more important in the annals of its long existence when he replaced Terence Dicks as script editor and oversaw arguably the greatest period of its history. But more on that next time. The Time Warrior sees a lot of what would become Holmes's trademarks, especially the tongue-in-cheek humour of gloriously over-the-top characters, here best exemplified in the brutish Irongron and his rather dense subordinate Blood Axe.
By the stars, Blood Axe, I swear I'll chop him up so fine not even a sparrow will fill its beak at one peck.
You can almost see Holmes chuckling as he wrote such ridiculous dialogue. We are also gifted by the first appearance of another memorable monster, who instantly takes a place amongst the top 5 Doctor Who villains.
I am a Sontaran officer. My name is Lynx.
The character of Lynx marks the debut of the Sontarans, the squat, brutal militarists, obsessed by war and conflict, locked eternally in their intergalactic struggle against the Rootans.
By virtue of my authority as an officer of the Army Space Corps, I hereby claim this planet, its moons and satellites, for the greater glory of the Sontaran Empire.
The climax of Episode 1, where the eponymous Time Warrior removes his helmet to reveal a head exactly shaped to fit it, has gone down as one of the best cliffhangers in the history of the programme. But really, what makes Lynx so memorable is the fantastic performance by Kevin Lindsay. The art department's advances with masks, building on the success of previous alien designs such as the Draconians of Frontier in Space, where incorporation of the actor's face resulted in more lifelike realism, results in the Sontaran potato head, which is quite convincing for the time.
Nothing also fair to face beyond the stars?
The variety of sentient life forms is infinite. Do you think your primitive features are pleasing to me?
Despite this, however, it is Lindsay's considered physicality and harsh delivery which really gives life to the character. This is no mean feat. Even the Daleks needed a small army to be formidable in their debut. Here, the viewer ends the story having a clear understanding of the race as a whole due to a superlative performance by just one actor. As always with period pieces, where the BBC had an entire stock cupboard full of ready-made costumes and sets, the production values are high overall, and seeing how gleefully Pertwee launches himself into the narrative makes one realise how rare a story like this has become by this point. As it comes in his last season, the Time Warrior stands as a great example of the Third Doctor finally getting an opportunity to travel in time as well as space, and serves as a tantalising hint of what was to come. By 1974, the team of Letts, Dix and Pertwee had overseen a revolution in the programme. It had attained a longevity and popularity that made it compulsive viewing and a firm Saturday night fixture. Many of its future writers and showrunners remember this era fondly, and therefore its distinctive signature is indelibly stamped on the years that follow. Pertwee played the Doctor for 5 years, longer than either of his predecessors, but now chronic back problems and the inevitable breaking up of the unit family encouraged him to make up his mind to move on. As a fitting bookend to his era, he stumbles, frail and pale, from the TARDIS, in much the same fashion as he had back in 1970. After so many years fending off invasions of his favourite planet, and facing not just the fears of others, but of his own, the action-star Doctor falls to the floor, and the emotion of the scene really makes it feel like a death.
Oh, Doctor, why did you have to go back?
I had to face my fear, Sarah. I had to face my fear. That was more important than just going on living.
Please, don't die.
A tear? Sarah Jane? No, don't cry. While there's life, there's...
For a generation, Jon Pertwee was the Doctor. Following him would be a tough act, but change was in the air, and what a change it would be.
Look, Brigadier, look! I think it's starting.
Well, here we go again.